It's a pleasure to be here. I just have I just have to tell you, I'm not originally from Maine. I'm actually originally from New York, but my husband and I moved to Belfast in 1983. And so I've seen a lot of these changes that I'm going to be talking about tonight firsthand. And it's a real plus that not only have I seen the changes, but I did work on the book, History of Belfast in the 20th Century, which then gave me a in-depth view, and I use that information quite a lot. So this is proving to be a very popular program that I've done. I did it for Belfast in July. I just did it 2 weeks ago for the Belfast Senior College. And because they gave me 2 hours, I pumped it up, but you've got the 1 hour version, which covers this very nicely. So it's a fascinating change. I decided on 1980 to 1990, because that's about the time the first of the poultry plants went down. And then eventually the second poultry plant gone by 1988. And then the changes that happened after that. It's been quite a remarkable ride. So it's very nice to be in this room and to see Camden's industrial waterfront, which is really nice. And I'm also working on several programs about the Goose River industry. So anyway, we're going to start with, we are known as the busiest little city in Maine, or sometimes the biggest little city in Maine. But I love this one, and there's always a rainbow. There was a lot of rainbows this summer, by the way. So this gives you this is our 1855 map, and I'm just focusing, for our purposes, along the waterfront. This open area of water was originally known as the puddle dock, because ships could come in with the tide and, go into the wharfs along the waterfront there, and then the tide would go out and they would be relatively low.
Opposite the Bay of Belfast, is that where the city park is?
No, that's further south. So across from here is the east side.
If we shut the lights over, that's.
Yes, that's right. Could we turn off the lights a wee bit? Sure. Okay, so you'll see how this changes. So here's the puddle dock, open water, and in general, a lot of the immigrant Irish are living along the waterfront here. So this is the poorer end of town. Wow. And then in 1875, so we get a railroad in 1870. So the railroad is now up on piers, going across the puddle dock. But it still allows for water to come in and out. And this is our the lower bridge, or now it's the Armistice Bridge in town. So we got a railroad, we've still got open water, but very soon, by 1890, it's this same area through here is now all filled in, and then because of a railroad along the waterfront, we're starting to even see in these early years an industrialized waterfront. So in addition to, industries on our rivers through the dams, our waterfront is where it's at. Shipbuilding and wharves, warehouses. And then one of the earliest businesses in 1855 is the Pierce's shipyard. And I think they built about five different ships. This is just where the lower bridge is. So that's one of the earliest shipyards. The rest of them are a little bit south of town, but we'll get there. And then there was also the Bayview Granite Company. They were taking granite off of the Oak Hill Granite Company and bringing it down here to be cut and processed. And there's the bridge again. And here's the lower bridge again, looking to the west side of Belfast. And this bridge has always had a draw in it to allow ships to head up the river. And then the other bridge, which is long gone, that also had a draw in it to allow boats. We had boats go all the way up to what's known as City Point. So here's the puddle dock in 1900. It hasn't quite, so we got the railroad in there. It's still open water. We've got people living along its edge there. And then very gradually, it starts getting filled in. It was actually the Belfast City Dump, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, as you can see, quite well used. Finally cleaned up during a World War II drive to clean up the cars and the tires, and it all got shipped out for scrap on the railroad. So that's so this is not a great area to dig deep. And here's another photograph, and there was also an oil company, down there for many years. And then just north of that, what's now the Armistice Footbridge, was Co-Mortimer Fertilizer Company, built in 1909 and removed in the mid-1930s. They were getting raw product from Rockland, the Rockland line. So it came in by barge, went through that wonderful cantilevered system into the factory, ground up, and either put into, here we go. They go from barrels to bags. So they were there long enough to make that jump. And I love the fact that Belfast is very well photographed. So I have a lot of photographs in our collection to draw from. So I just like the fact that they decided to document barrels and bags. And then here's the sardine plant, the sardine factory, opened in 1911 and removed in 2011. It actually closed in 2000, and then it took a few years for them to empty the warehouse and then eventually tear down the buildings. It was proposed to do something spectacular there, but we'll get to that. So that employed a lot of women and girls, herring, sardines, whatever fish they could get. This is a great photograph laying the foundation for this sardine factory. So I've discovered that I'm studying 1911 right now. We have a whole set of Waldo County Herald newspapers, and I'm going through 1911 because this is kind of the year that Belfast truly modernized. We got the sardine packing plant, the corn packing plant, and also the Colonial Movie Theater was built. So all of a sudden, Belfast is like on the move, and electricity is a big thing. So here's the Co-Mortimer on this side and the sardine packing plant. I just like this one for the weird colors. It has nothing to do with reality whatsoever going on here, but it shows you the lower bridge there and the beautiful view of Primrose Hill. Sardine packing ladies, very did a lot of work, especially during World War II. I believe they sent up to 1 million cans to the United States Army. And here's some of the ladies processing. You stood there and it was piecework. You filled boxes and got paid by the box. And then this is a great picture. In early November, Captain Albert Stevens, born in Belfast, went to the University of Maine, went on to become an aerial photographer in World War I over France. He's flying back to go to UMaine for a reunion of his class, and he swung over Belfast. We've got about eight aerial photographs that he took. And this just shows you how full our waterfront was in 1923. Barely a space, to breathe. And all the wharves, the warehouses, and then at the very end, there's the steamship wharf. And here's actually at the foot of Main Street, if you can imagine, was the Pajevscott Paper Company. They're basically just pushing logs. They didn't really do any processing here. But they were built in 1917 and destroyed by fire in 1921. No, some things came and went. So this is, I love aerial photographs. So in 1976, Robert Hall flew over Belfast, and we get the whole view, from, the lower bridge, the sardine packing plant, along the puddle dock, and then lower Main Street, and then further south. This is about the area that I'm talking about, right along the waterfront.
The towers.
The towers.
Is towers just under the July?
At 3 o'clock.
Oh, the feed mill.
The feed mill. We will do a lot on the feed mill.
I used to
'Cause
smell
that-
it.
You
I
did,
used to smell it.
yes.
It was rank.
It defined Belfast's character for a long time. Should we just say that? And it defined our waterfront. I mean, that's what you saw when you came into, and nobody came in, but So, and I heard there was up to 12 lobster boats at one time. Now I think we're down to 4, but don't quote me on that. But this gives you a nice view of that waterfront, and finally sewage control plant. And then in the late 1970s, we finally have sewage treatment control, but we've still got, the grain mill. And I always like to reference, here's the Consumers Fuel Company building. So you always know where you are if you can see that building. So, a lot of these buildings along the waterfront are just gone at this point. Here's another view going from the bridge all the way to what we now call the boathouse. So in between, you know, we do have the grain mill, we have Penobscot Poultry and Matthews Brothers, and Consumers Fuel Company is along there.
What year is that?
Well, the grain mill is still there, so let's say early 80s. And then I always point out the line of grease or coming out of the fish processing plant. Good fishing in Belfast. I mean, great fishing. You know, the chicken plants unloaded right into the harbor. And so we had a lot of, well, first the pogies, and then they were chased by the bluefish, and then there were the seals, and then there were the great white sharks that followed. So, you know, it was Sharkland. Uh-oh. What have I done? Better. So just a colorized version. I like color every once in a while. Otherwise, my world is very black and white. So now the grain mill is gone, and you can see now we have a harbor full of sailboats. And actually, you know, this ain't nothing compared to what we're seeing now. It's remarkable. And just because I like to fidget sometimes, so Clyde B. Holmes for Consumers Fuel Company brought the tugboats to Belfast in 1911. So this is another big move. And he was bringing down barges, you know, loaded with coal down the Kennebec River and then into Belfast. Most of these buildings are gone or they've been moved, you know, popped the other way. Marshall Wharf. One of the beautiful tugboats, the Clyde B. Holmes. I like the old ones, and then at work. And see the railroad tracks in the front. And then our railroad opened in 1870, last train left in 2005. And in the background there to the right, we have the major shoe factory, which also dominated the downtown.
Where did the trains go again?
They went to Burnham Junction, from Belfast to Burnham Junction. I want to say it's 26 miles, 32 miles, something like that.
Northwest?
Oh, God. Yeah, northwest. And then it met up with the Maine Central line, or the Maine Central. It was actually leased by Maine Central. It might have met up with the Bangor and Aroostook. I'm not sure. But it went to Burnham, and that was as far as you went. And then you had to switch trains, then they came back. And here's, you know, a little bit later in time. With the passenger station still in place, that came down in 1960 when passenger service ended. And then the freight house, which was used for a number of years by the Belfast Masters Theatre Company. All of that is now gone and is part of Front Street Shipyard, plus open space. Oops. So just another nice color photo. So in addition to the big grain mill at the foot of Main Street, we also had the railroad built their own grain mill. They thought they'd cash in on the grain business for the poultry companies. And so and then we had a lot of smaller industries throughout the late 19th century. Hay, coal, guano, grain, flour warehouse, grist mill, lumber, and feed. So, you know, in addition, and luckily, you know, because you got a railroad, you know, you have this ability, you know, to put industries on the waterfront, especially, you know, a granite processing plant. And I think that comes in this one here, here's the foundry and the granite processing right here. So here's the Consumers Fuel Company building. So we've got a grocery, ship chandlery, baled hay, granite, stone cutters, foundry, machine works, and lumber. That's all being, you know, processed and shipped out first by ships and then eventually, you know, by train. So very busy our waterfront. 1894 gives you an idea. And look at this, a massive amount of lumber here. So this is the what later became Consumers Fuel Company, but also Matthews Brothers is up in there. Matthews Brothers had sheds full of lumber, you know, all over that waterfront neighborhood. And we also had the Belfast Machine and Foundry Company, Cooper and Company Building Supplies, which later became the Diamond Match property. And I have always loved this photograph. Unfortunately, this building burned in the late 1970s, left a big empty spot. So here's the Dana Sarsaparilla building, later Roller Bushing Company, removed in 1917, right on the waterfront. And here's Belfast Fuel and Hay Company, coal, wood, and hay, later became Consumers Fuel Company. You know, everything was done by horse. It's amazing how many horses and stables and blacksmiths and veterinarians for horses that were in downtown. And here's one of the last ships being built at the Pendleton shipyard, and then smaller boats, and this is Matthews Brothers up on the hill here. So, Belfast Waterfront, $1 Million Mile. Ooh. Between the buttress of the Route 1 bridge and the southern tip of an undeveloped parcel of land owned by the Penobscot Poultry Company are approximately 6,614 feet of prime industrial real estate. Well, this is what that prime industrial real estate looked like in 1974. So, so that's a big dream. So we do have the sardine, company on the right. Actually, this is where the Cooper and Company had burned. This is the site of their fire. So that was kind of a mess. All along here was just not tidy. I mean, it was still a working waterfront, but it wasn't what we see today, and that's kind of one of the big differences here. Also, the big difference is how many people worked in downtown. It's as much about the people as it is about the commercial real estate. So this was rather interesting. In 1975, we've got a population of 6,207. We're barely at 7,000 now, but there's 23,320 in all of Waldo County, which is 26 towns. But here's the manufacturers of 25 or more employees. So Stinson Sardines got 125, Maplewood 300 to 350, Matthews Brothers 45, Penobscot Frozen Foods 90 to 100, Penobscot Poultry 400 to 500, and Truett Brothers 325, and Waldo Shoe 76 to 100. So there's 1,000 people coming into downtown Belfast every day. So small grocery stores, luncheonettes, a lot of bars, a lot of barbers too. We're full of, downtown was full of barbers. So you have to picture, what it is today, and then imagine 1,000 people coming to work. And most of them are coming in on foot, or they're riding horses, or living nearby, in Bayview Street, Union Street area, which most of those houses were cut up into small apartments or boarding houses. So Maplewood Poultry is one of the first big ones to move into the waterfront, just north of the lower bridge there. They were there from 1937 to finally in 1981. So they were providing, I love this. They were formed in 1937 by the Mendelssohns and Mr. Benjamin Heiger. And they were the originators of the Maine poultry industry and pioneers in the distribution of live poultry to metropolitan areas, mostly Boston and New York. And Maplewood marked the beginning of an era that established Belfast as the broiler capital of the world.
What did Belfast have made it especially good for raising chickens?
Well, most of the chickens were raised all over Waldo County and the state of Maine. Maplewood alone had 400 poultry growers.
So why wasn't it
at their disposal?
So why wasn't it done closer to Boston or closer to New York? What do we have?
They got this idea that Belfast would be a good place to be. I think because of the railroad. That's always an attractive feature. I really don't know what exactly drove them to Belfast, because they're all of these families, and even the Savitt's family who did Penobscot Poultry, they're coming up from the Boston, Malden, Massachusetts area. I think they saw an opportunity.
Did the chickens eat some sort of seafood smelts or something?
No, they depended on grain that was coming in from the Midwest, so that's why we had that grain mill at the bottom of Main Street. I know I think they saw a labor force. I think they saw a way, especially as we moved into World War II, they were providing, chickens as opposed to beef. So it was an alternative, because all the beef was going to the United States Army and the Navy. So this actually ended up filling a gap. So, but they are going in 1949 and full-time eviscerating plant, 1955.
also need a lot of land for the poultry, houses.
The houses, yeah.
Farmland was very, very cheap up here, whereas of course in some places it'd be more expensive.
This is true, and I think that because the farmers, I mean, you grew a chicken in 8 weeks. And, you know, it was very fast turnaround, and they got a lot of the original poultry growers only had like 2-story poultry barns. But once these guys came along, all of a sudden they're telling them, we need 3 stories now, and you're gonna buy the grain from us, or you're gonna buy the grain from our sister company. So, you know, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So they're talking about a million chickens per year. This is 1970. 1,200 are employed, 200 farms, and an annual payroll of 7,500,000. So this is the small guys.
A friend of mine just passed, he's 84,
Yeah,
and in his obituary, he said he was growing poultry for the Belfast.
it was amazing when I read that when Maplewood closed, 400 poultry growers were affected, which basically said out of business. You know, so, you know, it's always been hard scrabble in Maine. And this is, you know, Penobscot Poultry is still going strong, hoping to revive, you know, Maplewood. In fact, even at the end of Maplewood, Penobscot Poultry gave them money, you know, to help them keep going, but it just went bad. Maplewood Company, their grain mill was built at the bottom of Main Street in 1965. Rail cars brought the grains, the vitamins, the minerals in, and supplements, and then it went out by trucks to all of those growers. And then when they closed, that grain mill sat there empty. So it was finally purchased in 83, 84, it came down. So I'm just gonna keep rolling a little bit. So here's it was very modern, and they said it was computerized. So there was a lot of mixing going on within the structure itself. And then there's a giant silo in the back here where things are also being stored. So this gives you an idea of our harbor view. This is in the 1960s. And then finally, the Sylvina Beale comes in 1981, first little, you know, schooner to give people rides. But, you know, I love the contrast between the new and the old. And then just another aerial view of it. In 1982, that whole property was auctioned off. Turns out the city of Belfast and the railroad, which owned the railroad, owned most of the property, as well as Maplewood Poultry Company. So things had to happen there. And in 83, 84, at first they thought they could blow up the grain mill. And then they decided, well, maybe we could just knock it over. And then finally they punched these holes in it, put a big chain in and yanked it, and it went down. We actually have film footage of that at the museum. So it was an interesting, we missed it totally. We told a friend, could you let us know? And it just happened, you know. And then finally, clearing away the debris. So this opened up the whole lower end of Main Street and we finally got a breakwater and a harbor master, but you can still see, you know, the old tracks are still crossing the lower end of Main Street, which is now our harbor walk. So we got a new breakwater in 1989, which actually we need to either enlarge it or make it higher right now because of rising tides. Very interesting process going on. Then there's the other grain mill. They built it immediately once they tore down the passenger station, and there was 10 railroad cars of grain were loaded just for the railroad alone. Penobscot Poultry had their own grain mill within their own factory complex. So here's Penobscot Frozen Foods. They come in, you know, in the days when most women did not have a freezer in their home. You know, even if you had an ice box, you were doing pretty good. So this was a commercial operation, and you know, you killed a deer, you slaughtered it, you cut it up. You know, they packaged it and they froze it for you, as well as bacon, sausage rolls, franks, hamburgers, and fish sticks. So, and then finally they moved into the frozen stuffed potatoes. So here's Mr. Charles Pinio checking out one of the lockers here, where it is 40 below. So this is really cold, and you know, and so this was a popular thing, and it's this building actually still exists on our waterfront. we'll see it in a few moments, it's the big blue building that's still on the waterfront.
So it's like a community freezer?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was run by a company, and so you had your own locker number. I've seen photographs where, you've got, like at the dry cleaners when the clothes used to go around, deer, processed, deer waiting to be processed going around. And, if you slaughtered your steer as well. So they did try fish, they tried, squash, and then they finally then they morphed into, frozen baked potatoes and stuffed baked potatoes. So here's the first on the line in 1960. A lot of this is all being done by hand and very specially made, equipment. Here's when they tried squash. So this good place to store it outside, why not, But here's what we know is, the big blue building that still is down there, waiting for something to happen. And then here's a couple of items that we have in the museum collection. We have the potato wedgies, the stuffed potatoes. And I also know that a lot of people use these plastic bags. They gave them to their children to put over their socks, and then when they put on their winter boots. It was brilliant, it's a good way of recycling that. So we actually have a lot of these bags that people have kept your feet dry. And then here's Ted Starrett comes in 1983. He's going to buy the Maplewood poultry plant and refurbish it and gets all this new equipment going in and starts on the line, and then realizes, we're scooping out for every one stuffed potato, we're cutting apart 2 potatoes. And now all of a sudden he's got one full one and one empty skin. So what do you do with those skins? Well, you cut them up, you put them with cheese and spices and herbs, and you fry them. And, if you were still buying TGIF potato skins, they were coming out of Maplewood, and then out of Penobscot Frozen Foods, and then eventually from Penobscot McCrum. So here, this is it. They're doing more business in selling the skins of the potatoes than they are in the stuffed ones. So it's brilliant. Why not? And here's more. And it was, this is, a lot of women, a lot of men put to work here. And then here it is on the line. And then Matthews Brothers, of course, has been with us since 1854 and no end in sight. It is currently Maine's oldest continuously running manufacturing plant and the oldest window maker in the United States. So good for them. So they started in 1854. It started out with your basics, windows, sash, blinds, doors, shutters, windows and door frames. And then in 1989, they move off the waterfront and they occupy the former Truett Brothers shoe plant out on the Perkins Road. And they moved there 2 years later and they vacated the old factory. And they've continued to grow even out on the Perkins Road. And I believe they're open up a branch, I want to say Brewer, Maine as well. So here's the boys. Very enterprising group. And then did quite a lot of business. And in the early 1900s, they also made apple boxes and coffins. And then at one point, more towards the 1920s, they were also selling automobiles. And in 1919, they built the only 5-masted vessel in Belfast, the Jenny Flood Krieger. So, as I said, very enterprising people here. Hey, they had a workforce and they had a lot of wood. So here they're even talking about ship knee planing, and anyway, so go. And here's the factory right on the water. And they enlarged over the years and modernized. Here's some of the early crew. They always had a very small crew too. I don't know if you noticed that, even in the, mid 20th century, still only 45 people. They're well over 100, at this point in time. And then some of the guys on the inside, this was actually a rather dangerous place to work. I've also been tracking industrial accidents between the railroad and Matthews Brothers. You lost a lot of digits. And, you know, hands.
That guy's missing his second digit.
Is he, oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was actually fairly common. Well, look at the belts and things are, and, you know, cutters and saws and blades and, oh. So here's how it looked after they had left the building, April 4th, 1997. And here it is on April 17th, coming down, 1997. So they've made the move to the Perkins Road. And then also down there along the waterfront was originally, this is one of the first poultry companies. McLeod's took over a former a garage. This was actually, I'll explain it in a moment here. So 1945, McLeod Poultry Plant on Cross Street began processing 5,000 birds per day. And it was the first automated chicken processing plant in Maine. And it began by Mr. Wendell McLeod in the former Frost and Wilkins garage. And he began buying and processing poultry for local restaurants. This processing plant was actually its third facility and its last one before they sold out to Penobscot Poultry Company. And Wendell ran the company with a series of local men until the end of 1950 when he sold to Arcady Farms Milling Company, which actually was the grain company. And Al Savitz was its sales rep at that time. And then under Al Savitz's management, that the new Penobscot Poultry Company was built in 1956 with his partners George Lewis, his son Bernard, and Al's son Jerry. And some of you might have known Jerry Savitz. He opened and ran Darby's Restaurant in downtown Belfast.
Oh, yeah.
And as he said, my father polluted the harbor and I'm now working very hard to clean it up. So he was a good guy. So here's, you know, very little of McLeod Poultry Company, you know, exists now, except we still do have McLeod's Furniture, you know, in town. So they are still with us. And then here's the big Penobscot Poultry Plant with Matthews Brothers to the far right. Opened in, well, they founded in 1949, closed in 1988. So here's the new plant in 1956. It was a big day when this plant opened. So this is the dedication day. And I forget, it was July something. So here's the mayor's wife is smacking the building. And presidential candidate Adlai Stevenson happened to be in Maine, and he was invited to come. So here's Adlai Stevenson checking out a chicken, you know, and he was going to go to the Broiler Festival, but it actually got rained out that year. But he made a whole tour of the plant and, you know, made his, so here's the plant on opening day, brand spanking new. And then here's the, you know, chickens coming in. Very automated, but still hands-on.
Big chicken.
Big chickens. Yeah, they were always trying to grow a bigger chicken. So here's Mr. Stevenson checking out more chickens. So here's, and then of course the governor always came and crowned the broiler queen from, you know, 1950 on. And then the wonderful large platter donated by the Savitz family to the museum. And Diane Wing was the broiler queen that year. And then here's growing a big chicken, a 14-pound cockerel, result of the firm's breeding experiments. So these people were very proud of their chicken. And well, they should be. And then actually, this is a wonderful thing. I cruise eBay all the time looking for Belfast stuff. So maybe about 10 years ago, I see this, it was being advertised actually as a waxed chicken. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's plastic or something. So anyway, I bid on it. I won it. It was a paltry $15. It was coming from California. I get it to the museum. We start looking at it and then realize, wait a minute. This is a freeze-dried chicken. Because one of the legs, it doesn't show here, is actually broken, and you can see the bone. So this was a display chicken. Penobscot Poultry started shipping by rail frozen birds to California in the mid-1960s. And this obviously, since it came from California, I'm going to assume it went out as a display bird for a supermarket. And so I got that, and I've been very pleased with it. And then I did pick up a 5-pound can of chicken livers. You know, these are very hard. So it's very hard to get this industrial history. It's, you know, like there's nothing from the sardine plant except I have one of the glass blocks from the factory and a can. So I'm always looking for something else. So we move into the poultry world. It was, you know, a lot of these trucks are driving in every single morning. They grab the chickens in the dark while they're still asleep, throw them into the crates, and then the trucks start rolling into town to either Maplewood or Penobscot poultry. The feathers are flying. Every once in a while a chicken gets out, but poor Doris Light, who lived on Union Street, every day she went out and raked her front lawn. The poultry plant is just right behind her, and you can see one of the trucks right there. And there's always a northerly breeze in Belfast, and she's at the southern end of that. So
Yeah.
she just raked her lawn every single day. And, you know, people picked up, there were chickens
Yeah.
flying around, walking around, dazed. And then here, pollution, of course, was always a problem, whether it's coming out of Penobscot Poultry, the sardine factory, or Maplewood. You know, it was as bad as, you know, the blood, the fat, the feathers went out with the tide, came back with the tide. I understand it flowed all the way up to what's known as Upper Bridge, you know, like about 3/4 of a mile up the river, deposited on the shores there. And then a lot of this foamy stuff also ended up down in Northport. In, you know, the Bayside area, got caught in one of those little coves there. So this was a major problem that was going on, but luckily, you know, it did get finally cleaned up.
Yeah, I swam in there. I was about,
Oh, so you know about this, okay,
I was
so,
about 3 or 4 years old. I had, you know, just round pants and t-shirt on, and we lived in Waterville at the time. My dad would bring us up, and instead of going on the pool,
yeah,
we always went into the water, and, oh yeah, grease and chicken bones and chicken wing, everything, just gross. It was gross. We just moved it over and kept on swimming.
well, somebody once showed me how you swum in the bay. It's called the Belfast crawl.
Yeah.
So you pushed with one hand. People tell me these things, and I say, so you have corroborated. You had to push it out of the way, and then you swam.
Exactly.
Because actually that saltwater pool was very cold,
It was.
you know, so I think people just preferred to swim in the bay. So anyway, so Penobscot Poultry closes, and it actually, you know, becomes studied, because, you know, this is 1988, this is the second of them to close. It was a major blow, you know, to Belfast, and this was the story of Linda Lord, who I think spent 27 years in the killing room. If the chickens didn't get the automatic slicer, she had to finish them off. And yeah, she did it for a long, long time. So these are the workers on this was actually a wonderful exhibit at the library, as well as a book. This is closing day, February 24th, 1988. Everybody's hanging up their, you know, their uniforms and their hard hats. And there's also, you know, a lot of people there to help them get another job, get some training for something else. You know, there's a lot of, you know, things. So there's 400 poultry employees are out of work, 300 to 400 more in related jobs, like the truckers and the railroad and the growers that have lost employment. So in 1985, here's the poultry plant here, and here's Matthews Brothers, which also controls all of this. And, you know, so that is now about to become a ghost town for nearly 10 years. So in 1997, finally, we got the demolition crews in, and it was a hazmat operation. And you got within half a block and you thought you'd die from the stench.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. But it was a very clean factory. Otherwise, it was just that it had sat just for way too long. So it was a very big operation. Somebody asked me at the last time I did this program, where did they take the debris? I don't know. They trucked it out, because I'm sure it was full of asbestos and all that other stuff. But anyway, it took a while. And so here it is. They've taken down the poultry plant. Matthews Brothers is, you know, next on the line there. And what we call the, you know, the boathouse is here. And then I like this, you know, they say on some nights you can hear the faint sounds of clucking here. This is the proposed historic landmark, you know, in honor of all those chickens who escaped. So we had wonderful editorial cartoonists working for the Republican Journal or the Waldo Independent, which actually captured this time period very, very nicely. And then this is interesting, in less than 50 years, Penobscot poultry and Maine's poultry processing industry had risen, flourished, and fallen. So that also explains our high unemployment rate. I finally was trying to figure this out. Why was Belfast averaging 18% at this time? Well, it's because we have lost 600 jobs with Maplewood, 2 factories, Waldo Shoe, which was another 500 jobs. And then, this is a lot of people now suddenly out of work, and there's not another job on the horizon. So we actually lost 43% of our manufacturing jobs. And of course, our pay rate was not great either. So in the average weekly pay in the whole state was what, 310, but in Waldo County it was 235.13. And then, but change is coming. So you eliminate something and nature abhors a vacuum, as I like to say, and then all of a sudden it starts changing. So we got rid of the grain mill, and then all of a sudden we're looking to the future again. And we had a total shift in our city council. Back in these days, all 5 councilors came in and went at the same time. We now have staggered terms. So all of a sudden we had a new group called the Young Turks. And they were like, oh, let's get going on this. So they actually got the first comprehensive plan got going. So there were all these incredible plans put forward to the city council, and everybody went, oh yeah, okay, right. So here's one concept. I'm going to say this is Lower Main Street, maybe somewhere in there. And then this is another one. Then the railroad came up with their own, with a wharf for cruise ships to come in, and more plantings and more spaces for larger ships to come in as well. And then, green spaces, all around there. And then finally, they take the Diamond Match property, which was the big one right at the foot of Main Street. And it got deeded to Maine Coast Heritage Trust, which actually controls what happens in this heritage park in Belfast. One of the things was the trees couldn't be over a certain height. It was always keep the sight line for everybody to look out through the harbor and look out the bay. And at one point, I know the Chamber of Commerce wanted to put a gazebo in there. No, that was not allowed. So it's open.
Is the Heritage Park the one with the tennis courts, the pickleball courts?
No, that's our regular city park. Heritage Park is you get to the bottom of Main Street and right off to the right. It's in kind of like 2 sections.
Where the labyrinth is.
Where no, closer in. Yeah, just those two, where like French and Webb is. So there's all these incredible plans now being promoted. So here's the Diamond Match property. So here's the foot of, this what might have been at the foot of Main Street. 50-unit hotel, condos, and underground parking, a cost of $12 million. And the Baldacci Young, and then there was another one. So, and then the 7-story tower included massive wind chimes. If you can imagine what that would have sounded like day and night. And then there was another plan, I don't have a photograph of it though, 24 2-bedroom apartments, 11,000 square feet of retail, and then more office complex, 2.5 to 3 million, and then another one for 80 condos, retail, 150 boat slips, and then no dollar estimate on that one, but a feeling of wonderment prevailed at the architect's visions. So it took a lot of thinking and planning. And Chuck Rennie in 1987 thought, well, we've got the upper bridge, the tall bridge now is the Route 1. The lower bridge is, nothing's happening there except it's a pedestrian bridge. Why don't we turn it into a mall? Well, that didn't go over either. 30 shops and 50 boats. Here's another railroad proposal with a barge offloading dock and, cruise ships coming in. And more trees being added to downtown. And then this is another vision of a waterfront walkway on Front Street going towards the lower end of Main Street. And then yet another one as late as 1999, kind of a Disneyland concept. And at this point, I think consumers' fuel is here. So that gives you an idea, where this was going to occupy. And so that would have been, well, I don't know, the future is here. And then even as late as 2006, the old sardine packing plant was up for grabs as well. And there was a fellow who came up from New Jersey. This is actually his second plan. His first plan included something that kind of looked like the Sydney Opera House. It was like sails on top of the building, and everybody watching this on television fell off their couches. You could hear it all over town. Well, anyway, that didn't go through because their insurance company came down and said, "You're going to do what?" And he said, "No." That was the end of that. They had to give back the money. But here we go, 1980. Now we're looking ahead. The only possible direction is up. And then in 1982, we have a mandate from the newly elected city council to find grant money. Let's go for the money now. We're cleaning up, we're gonna do things. So they're getting a massive amount of money, 3 grants to be awarded. Rehabilitate Main Street, separate the stormwater and sewer systems, and $165,000 for construction of a breakwater. So that was good to come in. And so that started, we had to learn all these new, the acronym CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. So that was like the first time we ever heard of CDBG. But anyway, it brought us cement sidewalks, street lighting, tree plantings, and for a few years, hot tubs on every corner. No, actually, they were planters. But you can see, but in order to do this, they had to remove the beloved traffic dummy that stood for years at the foot of, in front of the post office. And, just directed cars around and around. And the state of Maine took it away, not the city of Belfast. And then they put in what they call the mother node. So this is what replaced it. So here's one of those planters. And then trees came in. And, we still have the lighting and the benches and the nodes. So here's Lower Main Street getting notifications here and changing, parking dynamics in town, which took a long time for people to get used to. And then here's the planter being used as a hot tub, which is very nice. I was not kidding. And then here we got a beautiful bank of streetlights. It replaced the only one. We had downtown Belfast at the intersection of Main and High had the only traffic light in all of Waldo County. And I do understand that, once tourist season was over, they actually turned it off. Because after Labor Day, they didn't need it anymore. But then we have, the bank of lights going every which way. And then Penobscot McCrum comes in 2004, and they buy out Penobscot Frozen Foods, the potato operation, and they continue they buy the processing plant and the freezer storage. And then here's a beautiful photograph by my friend Kristen Robinson, down there, basically took over that plant and just continued with the whole potato operation until, and here is at this point, only maybe 4 years ago, they're offering $11 an hour. And on March 24th, 2022, it burned to the ground. Luckily, it burned at night. It was a very skeleton crew in there. It got up into the ductwork, after you've been frying, thousands of potatoes for decades, that's what caught fire, and it just fed this. It just was, you could see the smoke from all over town. Luckily, there was it was not a windy day, because Front Street Shipyard was just south of here. And if that had blown, that would have been another one of those conflagrations. So, unfortunately for all of us, it was destroyed, but it did displace 138 workers. And they actually did, they shut down the bridge, they evacuated Harbor Hill Nursing Home, and they've been in business for a very long time. They did finally just announce in the last year or so that they are not going to rebuild. So they've already got a new facility that started in 2020 doing French fries. So they're growers from Aroostook County, so it made sense for the growers of the potatoes to buy the processing plant. But now, they're expanding their world up in, I forget what town it is, Washburn. So they're expanding up there, so everything's going to be happening up there as well. So here's the debris with a lot of potatoes. And then finally, this is it now, totally cleaned up. You'd never know that was something here.
It's nice.
So here's the blue freezer plant that's left over from this time period. And then, of course, David Hurley in 1982. 1982 was, Maplewood's gone, the end is looking good. So this is the Jared and Cohn Realtors bringing their trinkets into Belfast to start trading, with the natives, which is actually what happened. It's amazing what happened. We got there in 1983. Within 2 months, we had a postcard from the real estate company saying, we've got some people who would like to double whatever you paid for your house. Well, we had paid like Zippo for our house at the time. And so like double Zippo is not enticing. We said, no, that's okay. In my neighborhood, most houses were either condemned or they were selling for $9,000 or $10,000. This is Bayview Street and Alline Street, which is now the Golden Crescent, where houses are selling for $800,000 and up. So I did work on history of Belfast in the 20th century, and I got a great education on the New World and their writings. In fact, I put out some of the papers here. The introductions to Era 2 and Era 3 kind of helps also explain, what was going on here. And then Jay Davis wrote a wonderful thing for the Maine Times in 1998 about Belfast. Forgive us if we feel like Alice in Wonderland, who responds to the caterpillar's question, "Who are you?" with the plaintive reply, "I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then." So I thought that just summed up how we've been feeling in Belfast for like 20, 30 years now. So this is how the new Belfast, just taken in 2022, Front Street Shipyard has moved in. We've got the Harbor Walk, we've got the rail trail, Hamlin's Marine just came in, and now we've got a whole marina down there. Paul Narin took the old Consumers truck garage and has turned it into a small event center, and then Hamlin Marine is just beyond it, and then they have slips for motorboats, powerboats, and sailboats, and put in these giant swings for people to lounge about on.
Nice.
It's really nice, and we have food trucks, and little libraries popped up all over the place. And this is part of Heritage Park, so it had to be kept open to keep the view clear. And Front Street Shipyard, which just continues to astound everybody constantly. And then one day I was down there actually a year ago, this time, I get down to the bottom of Main Street and there's a Scottish pipe band playing. It's like, okay, this is great. This is Belfast now. And then we have the Phineas Quimby Labyrinth at the Commons Park. So what once used to be Matthews Brothers is now a labyrinth. And people are getting married on it, And finally, you all know about our ducks. So we have very clever people who like to do a lot of Photoshop in their spare time. So this year we actually had 3 ducks. And then we had the giant moon, and so somebody put together this wonderful scene. And so this is who I am. So I suggest you all come visit me at the museum. We're closed right now. We reopen in the spring, but I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And if anyone on Zoom has questions, you can type them into the chat and I will read them out loud.
Okay. So we're doing things now that nobody ever imagined, back then. They thought it would go on forever. But as we know, a lot of, and then the shoe industry disappeared and all the clothing manufacturing disappeared. Those were, industries that were away from the waterfront a little bit. So I didn't focus on them. But, our giant, when those 2 shoe factories went down, that was another death blow. And, Belfast also had been full of, pants manufacturers, working men's clothing, and they just disappeared over time. I think it was, all 6 of our major industries supplied, during World War II, they were put to the max and supplied the United States Army with, all sorts of stuff, and the Navy as well. We built 2 barges for the United States Navy during World War II as well, so.
I have a question on Zoom.
Okey-doke.
Do we know what is coming into the space that was McCrum's processing?
No, all we know is that the McCrum family is not going to rebuild. There's nothing, we don't even know if it's for sale or not, so,
A mystery.
a mystery. Your guess is as good as mine. We don't know, it depends on what we're gonna allow.
What ideas do you think would be a good use for that property?
I am not the idea person. No, I really have no vision.
JP Turner will take it. What?
We're kind of hoping that maybe Front Street Shipyard might want to expand, but, we don't know how far he's stretched. Everybody's clicking around, well, condos, hotel, but, I don't know if that property is in the floodplain or not, but we're getting very close to waterfront property being endangered, like the boathouse in Belfast that we use for events. They're going to let it go. We can't, you get that southeast, southwest wind coming through and it's just flooding that whole area and knocking down that wall that protects, that. So, at some point, we've got a climate crisis committee that's talking about raising the breakwater and to keep those floods from coming in. So it's real for us. So so any more questions?
Not at this moment.
Okay, so actually there is another thing that I didn't even talk about here, in October 2019, the presidential yacht Sequoia came into Belfast. And to answer everybody's burning questions, what's going on there? Well, actually, nothing. So the yacht is actually leaving Belfast next week. It is heading, French and Webb somehow was not able to get their project going for various reasons. I'm not too sure why. I think also it's where the yacht is placed, it is not a safe place. Like last year, we had the big wind and it blew off the white tarps. Yeah. And now there's a question about flooding. So it is actually leaving by Wolf and Wolf, or whoever they are, by barge. It's going down to Cambridge, Maryland area on the Choptank River to the Richardson Maritime Museum, where they're going to build a more permanent building around it and do the restoration work down there. So we finally know where that's going to go. So now you're up to speed.
And that's next week, you said?
Next week, I think the 16th or the 17th, so it's coming right up.
They actually transferred it to the ocean-going barge in Cambridge when they came up from Virginia.
So it's going back to where it was, yeah.
Because it was in Deltaville, Virginia for many years. I was on it in Deltaville.
Oh, yeah?
And I was on it in Savannah.
Okay.
I actually was on that boat when it was operating.
Yeah, I've had people come and tell me about that, because it was sort of an event tour boat, yes.
What's the situation in Belfast about the ships coming in first? Are they allowed
Do you mean the cruise ships?
Yeah.
Well, because of our harbor, we can only accommodate the small cruise ships. So the American Cruise Lines has asked to come back into Belfast Harbor this summer. They've built a new catamaran boat, because now they've included going up the Penobscot River to Bangor, and they needed a boat specially built to fight those currents and also to get into Belfast Harbor so they actually took a year off while they built the boat. So as far as I know, they've given them the okay to come in.
Economy, I should think.
It is, and then we still have I think the schooner Charm is still doing cruises, as well as a small motorboat, well, not small, the back and forth that also does harbor cruises. And then somebody else came into the city council and asked for a berth place for another small schooner to do like up to 12 people. So they're smaller vessels.
Oh,
But, then we have to accommodate those yachts
yeah.
that come in. So our harbor master, Kathy's been doing it for a long time now, and she knows. It's an amazing how she squeezes them in. She's right on top of things. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
And thank you, Julia. See you again.
I have a question that's unrelated to this.
Okie dokie.
The symbol of the Belfast
Ah.
Historical Society Museum, what's the story of
Oh,
that?
it's the weather vane off the shoe factory.
Oh.
And we actually have it on our barn.
Oh, cool.
So it came off the big Daly Brothers shoe factory, and somebody, you know, it's always weird when people come by and goes, oh, my father had that, how did you get that? It's like, well, I don't know, it's been here, and it's been on the barn since 1976, so, I like to use it as our symbol. And it's a working weather vane,
That's cool.
kind of nice.